There's more stuff that we can overdo today than ever before. People who tend to overdo those behaviors, if you can just substitute a better, more productive behavior, oftentimes the bad behavior falls away. If you find yourself overdoing whatever it is, online shopping, eating junk food, spending all this time on your phone, on Twitter, or whatever it is, usually that's an indicator that you're just bored or you're just inherently unsatisfied in your life in some way.
Easter, award-winning journalist, contributing editor to Men's Health, which I used to read religiously. I don't know if I've read it in a while, but I feel pretty healthy. Professor at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV, and author of The Comfort Crisis. My favorite book, was that 23 or 22?
21.
21. My favorite book in 22, because I read it in 22. And then Scarcity Brain is the most recent book. We're going to talk about both of these. How you doing, Michael?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. This will be fun.
This will be fun. We're going to dive right in, okay? I want to talk about both books because I think they relate to a lot of the issues that people deal with as they're aging, but also as they enter a time of life freedom. I don't even like the word retirement, but it's having more control over your time and obviously the money end of it. So let's start with the comfort crisis. For me, that is what I call the energy pillar. You know, there's 4 pillars in non-financial retirement, which is, in my world anyway, energy, having passions, having relationships, and a growth mindset. And I think of the comfort crisis really hitting well on the energy pillar, building energy so you can show up for your life. Are you familiar with who Phil Stutz is?
I'm not, no.
There's a documentary called Stutz on Netflix.
Maybe I've come across it. I'll have to watch it.
It really plays in well with comfort crisis. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. Phil Stutz is, "You will never be exonerated from uncertainty, pain, or the need to do hard work." Most people create stress in their life when they're trying to be exonerated from having to do work, having to go through pain or uncertainty. And I think of pain, uncertainty, and hard work. I think of, you will never be exonerated from discomfort. It's just a matter of when you actually have to deal with it, right? You can be more comfortable now. You're probably going to be more uncomfortable or under discomfort later in life. So when you were exploring this subject, talk to me, what was your objective in exploring the comfort crisis? Why did you pursue that as a project?
My job as a journalist, and my job is to make observations and tie threads together that might seem like they're seemingly disparate at the surface, right? I just made the observation through my life and through my work at Men's Health that most things in life that have a big, good, things that are good for us, I guess I will say, you usually have to go through short-term discomfort to get the benefit, right? So if you think about exercise is uncomfortable in the short term, but it improves your life in the long term. Right? If you think about, if you wanted to lose weight, you would probably have to eat less. You're going to be hungry in the short term, but then you'll reach that goal in the long run. Same with mental health. You probably have to go through some short-term discomfort, have some hard conversations, and then your life improves afterwards. And so it was really just noticing that sort of architecture of improvement, that you have to do things that are going to be challenging in the short term to get a long-term benefit. And yet the catch is that I think our world is set up today, and this is new in the grand scheme of time and space, to incentivize taking the sort of short-term comfort, the short-term reward at the expense of long-term growth. So one of the stats that I use all the time is that 2% of people take the stairs when there's also an escalator available. So what that tells us is that humans are wired to do the next easiest, most comfortable thing, even when we know it doesn't serve us in the long run. And the reason for that is because for all of time, to survive, doing the easy thing, doing the comfortable thing, it would have given you a survival advantage, right? You don't want to move around too much when you've got a scarcity of food in the past, right? You want to default to safety and shelter and not take risks and all these things, but it doesn't necessarily serve us today.
Did you know that going into writing the book and doing the research?
Well, I think it's like you make a few observations, you go, oh, wow, those all have the same commonality. And then once you start to actually really dive into the book and so books generally start with a proposal, which is kind of like a business plan for a book. And so you write out the proposal, and then hopefully a publisher buys the book, and then you go report the thing. And I mean, I learned a lot in the reporting that was not in the proposal, just things that I hadn't even thought of that just sort of manifested themselves because I did a lot of on the ground reporting and went a lot of different places. So
now you call it reporting. Is that I read it as you did research to see if, to prove the point, or once you found a assumption, you didn't just make it. You went and did the research to, is this really true? Which is, I guess, what a reporter does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Standard issue journalism, hit the ground, go talk to people, go places, read as many studies as you can, talk to as many interesting people as you can. Ideally, you want to go there. I think one of the issues that journalism is facing now is there's a lot of writers who don't leave the office. And especially in the world that I work in, and I imagine I imagine most worlds, if you're not out actually doing the thing and going there and having conversations with the people who are living the thing and doing the work, you're not going to totally get it. I mean, you're just kind of like pontificating from a chair, and you're just not going to learn as much. I mean, I really learned that when in reporting the comfort crisis. Like I said, there's so many topics that ended up in that book that are just a direct result of having been out in the world and doing that reporting or researching, whatever we want to call it, and having them sort of appear and go, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. But then they end up in the book, right?
So by human nature, we're wired to pursue comfort because we're trying to stay alive, right? From a long-term perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So the world for all of humanity's 2.5 million years was uncomfortable. It was harsh. There was never enough food. It was too hot. It was too cold. It was XYZ, right? All these different discomforts you can think of. And so the people who lived and spread their DNA were people who tried to avoid discomfort, right? They did the next easiest thing. They didn't burn energy when they didn't have to. Right? When it got too cold, they were like, we got to get a fire going. We got to get warm. And so this sort of desire we all have to be comfortable kept us alive for all of time. Now that you apply that, I mean, it still helps us in many ways, but once you apply that to a world where you can do comfortable things all the time, it tells us, yeah, don't take the stairs, even though that's going to be better for your health in the long run. Or when you have the opportunity to overeat a little bit, you might as well take it, but we now are surrounded in food, so that doesn't make as much sense. And there's just so many areas where this manifests itself in daily life.
I think in the book, there was an argument, there's a mismatch with the abundance of comfort we have today, and it's not really serving us. I think as you were talking about taking the stairs, I was thinking of those runners in airports that move you along faster with walking. It seems like the world is designed, we all want comfort. People want to retire because they want comfort, right? They're tired of all of the work and the stresses related to it.
Yeah, the word actually is mismatch. So anthropologists just call it a evolutionary mismatch. When a drive that we evolved to have that served us for all the time, we get put in a different environment and it becomes counterproductive.
So what do we do to counter that? Or should we do anything about it? Why is that a bad thing to be comfortable?
Well, I mean, if you're always doing the next most comfortable thing, I think that you see problems start to set in pretty quickly with people. So the average person today, for example, they take about 4,000 steps a day. Now, in the past, people took more than 20,000 steps a day, and they were also active in many other ways, right? And so then you go, okay, well, why do we have this surge of chronic diseases we all have today? It's like, well, because we take 4,000 steps a day, right? The drive that we have to be comfortable, it doesn't serve us in the long run. And you take eating, for example, right? We evolved to overeat when we had the opportunity because there was usually never enough food. So if you happen upon, like just by chance, you happen upon a pile of food, you're like, well, I should eat all this because then it'll make me a little bit overweight. And then when the famine inevitably comes, I'm probably going to survive that because I have some weight on my frame to weather the storm, if you will. We still have that in a world where there's no famine in the US, right? So it leads people to become overweight over time, and that can cause issues. And I mean, on and on and on.
And so that we have more food, that we eat more, and we're moving less. And I think in your book, you have a quote that from some of the research that being out of shape is the new smoking in terms of a crisis, at least in America.
Yeah, I think one stat I came across is that it can take as many as 13 years off your life. And I mean, we do know that one of the best things you can do to improve not only just how long you're going to live, but how well you're going to live is to be active. Like you find that people, once their knees start hurting or because they've been inactive their whole life, or once their back starts hurting for the same reason, quality of life just goes down super fast. They start moving even less. And then it's usually not long until someone passes away. And if you can just like maintain activity your entire life, like your chances of living much longer and much better are very high.
This sounds hard though.
Yeah, well, that's evolution doing its thing.
But we will never be exonerated from it, right? I think of Peter Attia, and you had a great interview on Peter Attia's show of by embracing discomfort, taking the stairs, or silence and meditation, or stressing your body, you change the trajectory that you're on, right? An old phrase I used to have was, hey, you can focus on your health or not. You'll likely live just as long, but if you don't focus on your health, your life probably will just suck more.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you won't be able to do the things that you want to do.
I do think obviously there's a barrier to entry, but I do find that once people actually start exercising or become more active or lose a little weight, whatever it is, the benefits start to compound and they start to kind of almost they feel off if they don't get enough movement in, so I think that, and that's really, like I said, it's like things that are challenging in the short term come with the biggest long-term rewards.
Okay. So how do we start being more uncomfortable?
I mean, I do that. The reason that my whole brand and newsletter is called 2% is it's like the stairs are a metaphor for the decisions we can make every single day, right? You've got the stairs on the left, you got the escalator on the right. You got to get up there one way or another. Which are you going to choose? Right? You can take the escalator and that's more comfortable in the short term, or you can go up those stairs. And by doing that every single time you have the option, you're going to be way better off. Like people think this kind of stuff doesn't add up. It's like, oh, it does. Like, for example, there's a Mayo Clinic study that found that people who just move more throughout the day, don't even exercise, quote unquote exercise, they can burn as many as 800 calories a day. That's like running 8 miles. So this stuff really does add up. And it applies to anything in life, right? It applies to the relationships you have with people. Are you going to like pick up the phone and call someone? Wouldn't it be much easier to text, but like picking up the phone and actually having a conversation is going to be better for that relationship, right? It applies to how we approach food. It's like, it's okay to be a little bit hungry sometimes. Like you're not going to starve, right? Your brain might tell you you are in the short term, but you won't. And if you can just take that idea of like 2%, the idea of embracing short-term discomfort to get a long-term benefit and apply that to as many areas of your life as you can, even in your work life too, right? That's where the magic starts to happen.
What I like about that is because we tend to make these health-oriented things big. I got to join the gym. I got to buy the equipment or the clothes. And it feels productive. You actually get the sense that you're doing things. Science has shown you're getting the sense that you're accomplishing something when actually you're not doing anything. You're not taking the stairs. So it's these little micro changes, which bluntly get harder as you get older, right? Because obviously your energy level and your biochemistry is changing, but your knees creak a little bit more. I mean, I hobble a lot, but I'm always happy when I exercise, but it's hard to get exercising or taking the stairs when your knees are a little creaky that day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there is a lot of, I will say as a general rule, less activity will get you sicker than more activity will. So even when you look at research on knee injuries, people who have the most knee pain aren't necessarily the most active. It's usually people who are the least active who have the most knee pain, just because everything has so devolved that when they do go out and do anything, it's like they're working on nothing. And then knee pain sets in. Does that answer your question kind of?
It does. And I think the key is you're going to have to fight that trend. Like as you get older and you're dealing with the aches and pains that come from getting older, you almost have to lean into it.
Yeah.
You almost say, pain is my friend. It's okay to be discomfort. It's better to walk and be a little achy than not to walk at all.
Yeah, because, okay, so what's the answer? It's like, I'm not going to walk. Okay, well, you're probably going to be dead in like 5 years if that's your approach.
Yeah, to go back to the outlive, you've changed the trajectory of your life. The arc has changed, probably to the detriment of your health.
Yeah, exactly. When people really stop moving, it's really not good for their lifespan afterwards.
So the message here is take the stairs and do incremental changes.
Yeah, take the stairs, go for a walk. If you're parking in a parking lot, park in as far as you can away. And again, people are like, well, that sounds too easy. It's like, okay, well, I guarantee we'd all be a lot healthier if we actually did it. So why don't we actually do it and then see how it goes?
All right, I want to pivot. There's a lot to talk about. We could talk about that for an hour, but I want to pivot. And I think there's a lot of parallels to your book, Scarcity Brain. And for me, this hits on what I call vision of what we want our life to be. And in our world, what I've discovered, we just had our 10th anniversary for the podcast.
Nice.
Which is awesome.
Congrats.
And one of the unexpected things I discovered through whatever 500 plus episodes is that there's two crises, if that's the word, in retirement. There's the real crisis of the majority of people do not have enough money for whatever reason. They either because they, weren't able to take the discomfort of saving or life circumstance or whatever. That is the real crisis. There's another not very, you almost feel weird talking about this crisis because it's like, well, that's not a problem relative to that big crisis, which is not being able to get out of the loop of accumulation. Because accumulating more and more, whether in this case we're talking wealth and possession, there's a very unhealthy feedback loop of safety. Just give me more, just give me more, just give me more. And what I have found is that people have difficulty overcoming their frugality once you get to the harvest time of life, when you've built your wealth out of luck and hard work or whatever circumstance. And now you're set to where you have to harvest it, which means you stop saving, you stop accumulating, and you lose your purpose in work, and you're supposed to actually go spend this money. So most people will default to not doing that. Understandably. And that abundance is not as much of a crisis. It's a crisis for those people, right? Because then you end up having a life unlived, dying with too much money, which denies obviously the experiential things you could have done and the memories for your family, but it also denies the world, right? Of what you could have used those resources for. In your research for Scarcity Brain, which is one of my highly tagged books here, why do we have this constant feeling that we don't have enough?
You're going to find a theme here that most of my work, it looks at. So I think that basically the past explains current behavior, even if it doesn't seem to make sense. So kind of back to evolution, it's that humans evolved in environments where there was never enough of what we needed to survive. Food, stuff, information, even status, on and on. And so if you were the type of person that overdid those things, hoarded those things when you got them, craved those things, you would have a survival advantage. And today we just have that ancient DNA that tells us to keep getting more, keep hoarding, that you don't have enough in a world where we do have a lot of these things, right? And so I think that can present another one of those mismatch scenarios.
Yeah, I think in retirement especially, because the modern retirement is very different than our grandparents in that we're living longer than ever. We don't have pensions like they had. And our grandparents, when they retired, they were sitting on the park bench, right? They were worn out from all this physical labor that we were talking about earlier. I remember my grandfather was a postman. When he moved to Florida, he was done. He was just worn out physically. And modern retirees, they're living longer, they don't have pensions, and they're actually wanting to be on the playground of life. This is their chance to actually go do things. So there is a huge worry of running out of money, even with people that are extremely wealthy. It doesn't matter how often you show them that worry is so prevalent that they deny using their resources.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. My grandpa retired when he was like 50 and he was like, yeah, I'll probably live till 72. And he lived till 83. And my grandma lived till 90 somethings. So they had like the money goes till we're about 72, and they were smart with that. I mean, they were totally fine in the end, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely much different now. And I even take the case of my mom. She's 73 and she still hasn't retired. She's just kind of been saving. And part of it, I think part of it is financial, but also part of it is that she just enjoys her work and is like, well, I can kind of do it at a lower level for a while and we'll see how it goes. And yeah, so.
Well, continuing to work and save is also inertia, right? It feels good because earning money is agency. I mean, probably one of the first agencies that we've had in our life is the first time we earned $1 and we could choose what we wanted to do with it, right? One thing that you pull out in scarcity brain is the idea that we are wired that less is bad and more is always good.
Yeah, more is good. So there's this great study that I talk about. It's by this guy who's at University of Virginia. And I won't get into the whole weird reason that he made the finding, but basically they did this series of studies where they had people solve problems. All these different kind of strange problems. For example, one was a Lego bridge that was kind of scawampus, and it's like, okay, make this Lego bridge normal. Another one where they had to improve a golf putting hole. So there was a mini golf hole, and the hole had like all these features on it. Like it was just like a hoarder hole, right? Another where they had to improve a trip to Washington, D.C. It was a 12-hour trip and they had 12 different things planned for the trip. So in all these examples he gives people, he's like, how would you improve this? And they're all totally packed with stuff. The obvious answer is to remove things in all of them, right? And every single time, the people, they would add more things. So they were like, oh, I think if we just add another excursion to this already packed trip, or I'm going to solve this problem with the Lego bridge by adding more Legos rather than simply taking them away so the bridge is straight that way. With a golf hole, it's like, it would have been a lot better if they just removed some of the features, but they all just added. So this was 8 out of 8. And when he asked people, how would you make this worse in a couple of examples, they said, oh, I would take stuff away. So what he basically found is that when we try to solve problems or when we try to improve something, humans tend to default to addition. We don't even think of subtraction. It's not that adding or subtracting are any better, right? They're basically the same. But if we're not even thinking about subtraction when we come to a problem or when we try to improve something, that's a big problem. Right, because we're leaving 50% of our options off the table, and there's a high likelihood that if you do the math half the time, that might be the right answer. And you see this too, and like you just see how much stuff. I mean, think of how much more stuff we have in our homes, right? If you have a problem now, it's like, well, hell, there's definitely something to fix this on Amazon, and you end up with like some super specialized vegetable spiralizer, right? It's like this very discrete tool to solve this one problem. And then it's like you do that enough times and it's like, well, why does our kitchen have so much crap in it? It's like, well, because you add so much, right? You look at, there's this other great study that found incoming university presidents are 10 times more likely to add new programs than they are to remove ones that aren't working. And this is like in Scarcity Brain, I just have this it's probably the longest paragraph in the book where I just do this rapid fire of like, here are all these modern examples and all these different facets of life where you can just see like, yeah, we just keep adding and adding and adding.
Where that has played out in my profession when it comes to the financial part of it, Michael, is when we're building what we call a retirement plan of record. I don't want to know, and it's somebody coming in new, fresh. We build the plan without understanding anything that they actually own. So like if they had a IRA or a 401k, I don't even want to know what's in it. I just want to know the value of it with the idea of building what should be rather than tweaking what is. Because if you just take what is, usually it's adding to it, right? Well, we'll move these things around and buy these 3 things. And it ends up being a lot simpler solution if you don't get caught in adding to all the other stuff. Last week, I had a behavioral psychologist, Dan Crosby, who's a good friend on, who focuses more on the behavioral tics we have just in investment management. And which I think there's a lot of value there, but I love these 2 books as it relates to retirement planning because it's not about, we have so much psychological baggage beyond just simply investment, greed, fear, decision-making. One being, we default to more. And that doesn't always serve us well. Or we default to comfort. That doesn't serve us always.
Yeah, well, it's also like, I would imagine having a giant pile of money in the bank is more comfortable too, and like wanting to let it sit there, right? It like gives this illusion of safety. In the meantime, you're missing out on all these life experiences that you could have had. It's like people have a hard time asking, why am I working in the first place? It's not to get a pile of money. The pile of money is only helps you achieve some other means. I mean, maybe it could be the pile of money for some people, but that's like, okay, now you got the pile of money, then what? Like, no one's ever satisfied with the number, right? So, yeah, I think it's worthwhile to step back and ask why you're working in the first place.
And also to realize that we're naturally are wired to want more. And I have some stickers around here. I can't find them. I like to make stickers, Michael. I'll send you a few. But one of them in the retirement planning work in space is the people that do retirement planning are numbers people. So they want to quantify everything. So my stickers say, I think 3 or 4 times in a row, retirement is not a spreadsheet. Retirement is not a spreadsheet. That came to mind when you were talking about quantifying goals may not be the best thing to do. I think you had an example like with GPA, you end up going towards the quantification grade rather than the actual learning. So sometimes that can actually be detrimental to our fulfillment.
Yeah, I mean, I think what fascinated me, one of the most fascinating things when I was reporting Scarcity Brain, is I talked to this guy who he basically discovered that humans have only been using numbers for about 10,000 years, which is like not much time at all, like in the grand scheme of things. So numbers are not really natural to humans. And there's still groups of people who don't use numbers in the world. There's these tribes in the Amazon, and they basically quantify things by more or less small, medium, and large. Like this one's smaller, this one's medium, this one's large. And they can only count up to 3. So this basically tells us like numbers are not this natural thing to us. We invented them in order for progress. But I think that the way we see them used now, where we're quantifying everything, they tend to capture people's values and attention. So we tend to think that like, oh, if you can quantify something, like that is right, that gives you certitude, that gives you exactitude. But we often quantify things that are these like big, complex questions. And you could, I guess, try and solve these, or rather interpret the best way to do these different things many ways, not just with numbers. So you brought up GPS, and that's a good example. It's like, why do you go to school? It's like, well, you want to learn certain things, but you also want to like learn to be around other human beings. You want to learn how to turn things in on time. You want, like, you could just go on and on and on. All the things that school is good for and what you are there to do. But when you put grades on GPS, students just start to obsess over the grade point average, right? They're just like, that's all they care about. And they miss all these other big important things. Not only they, but like their parents and all these things. So basically, once you start to quantify, it tends to capture attention, and it tends to bend our values towards the number. So we value the number for the sake of it while missing what the number is actually supposed to stand for.
Yeah, I see this with authors that want to be a New York Times bestseller. They're more focused on that than the journey of writing the book or the impact of the book, because that's the number in that case. I was thinking of college, and Billy Joel came to mind, right? If you're a straight A student, you're thinking too much.
Yeah, exactly. I can tell you these lists are ridiculous. Like, it's this insane algorithm to get on these. Like, I was on there and I'm like, I don't even know how the hell it works, you know?
I was wondering if you actually, because that is a game that people play to get on those lists.
Yeah, people used to like mess with, so then they had to then the New York Times had to invent games to stop the games. And like, it's this crazy thing. There's obviously like some value in it, but the value is entirely fabricated by what people think it stands for. There's books that have sold millions of copies that never made the list because of what it prioritizes.
Right. Scarcity Brain makes the case, and very well researched, that we default to more as humans. We consider less as bad, right? So we don't think about simplification, and that quantification has a downside, right? Quantification is important for sure, but it's like Aristotle's, golden mean. There's a balance in the extremes, and we tend to go the extreme on quantification. And I want to hit a couple more things related to scarcity brain, and how I think this all weaves into overcoming frugality and actually giving yourself permission to create a great retirement or life. Doesn't really matter retirement or not. One is, can you define what the scarcity loop is?
Yeah, it's this behavioral loop. If you want to get a person to repeat a behavior over and over and over, behaviors that we overdo, they tend to fall into this scarcity loop. So it's got three parts. It's got opportunity, unpredictable rewards, and quick repeatability. So opportunity, you got an opportunity to get something of value. Unpredictable rewards, you don't know when you're going to get the thing of value. Could be now, could be later, and you also don't know how valuable it's going to be. And then quick repeatability, you can immediately repeat the behavior. So where I learned about this was studying slot machines in Las Vegas. That's exactly how slot machines work, right? You have an opportunity to win money, but you don't know if a game is going to be a loser, if it's going to be a winner, how big of a winner it's going to be, or when you're eventually going to win. And you can just repeat immediately. But this loop, it's been put in, so it's what makes social media work. It's being put in personal finance apps. It's leveraged by online shopping. Like, it's getting leveraged by all these different institutions and businesses today, often to lead us to repeat behaviors that we later regret. So it's really kind of the architecture of addiction if someone is really just over and over and over with a behavior.
And you really go into this in the book. And I have a t-shirt that I make t-shirts too, just for fun. If I want a t-shirt, I'll make one. And it says, resist the algorithms, which is, if we're wired to always want more and less is bad, and quantification is something that can become its own thing that may not serve us. When I read the scarcity loop and you went to a lab where they actually, it's like a gambling lab that even consumer product companies go to, et cetera, I worry that we're fighting a loser's game in trying to overcome frugality, because everything is pushing us towards getting into this scarcity loop, whether that's buying more things on Amazon or eating more potato chips or what have you. I don't know how you fight that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, it's harder. There's more stuff that we can overdo today than ever before. So I'll say that. I'll also say that people who tend to overdo those behaviors, if you can just substitute a better, more productive behavior, oftentimes the bad behavior falls away. So it's really learning, like, if you find yourself overdoing whatever it is, online shopping, eating junk food, spending all this time on your phone, on Twitter, or whatever it is, usually that's an indicator that you're just bored or you're just inherently unsatisfied in your life in some way. And there's other ways that you can get that stimulation that actually improve your life in the long run. So things like going outside, volunteering, finding hobbies that don't drive you crazy like Twitter might, or take away your money like Amazon might. I think it's really identifying that and then trying to find something that's going to give you whatever that thing was giving you, but that has positive benefits.
Yeah, I think usually what people think of when they're trying to figure out their vision for their life, when you retire, it's sort of like going to college or getting your first job. Like the slate is clean. You can live anywhere you want. You can make all new friends. And there's this stress of creating a vision for the rest of your life. But that seems to be probably not a good way of going about it, because that's a lot of stress. Who am I going to be when I grow up is essentially the question. Better to go out and play just as you would have in school. Go join these clubs, go explore things. And that will naturally get you out of all of these online loops that are literally billions of dollars are being spent to keep us in that loop.
Totally. I mean, that's been demonstrated in a lot of studies as well.
The price of not pursuing this is literally your life. I go back to Bronnie Ware, who is a hospice nurse in Australia. Wonderful book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And all of them are related to missing your life, because you were living a life that other people had expectations for you, that had on you. You weren't living a life true to yourself. And that's really the cost of staying in these loops or not embracing discomfort, is you're going to increase the chances of having regret at the end of life, because I have too much money at the end, etc. Always enjoy hanging out with you, Michael. We'll have links to your books. They're wonderful. I won't have you won't get all my highlights in it, but we'll have links to your books and you can highlight it yourself.
That's awesome. I love that.
All right, buddy.
Right on. Well, I enjoyed chatting. Thanks for having me.